he's like, well, if we can have a dialogue. So I'm going to try, so I don't get thrown off the board, to ask enough of the questions. Just, for all board members, and Dan, you can fire me later on. So anyway, with that, let's start. First question. When you started Whole Foods, you're fresh off of living in a collective. I'm not even going to ask.
I was still living in that community.
Okay, probably there's a good digression there, but I'll stay away from it. Anyway, how, if all, did that experience shape your capitalist views?
You mean living in the community?
Yeah, living in the community.
It really didn't. I mean, when I was living in Piranha House, vegetarian cooperative, that was when my food consciousness awakened. Because it was vegetarian, I wasn't vegetarian when I moved in. I actually just moved in, I just thought I was interested in all things counterculture at that point, and I just thought I'd meet some really cool people living in a vegetarian co-op, and I did. I met my girlfriend, for one thing, and we co-founded the business with me. But I became the food buyer for that co-op. I learned how to cook. I was passionate. I mean, it was like this whole big new universe opened up for me. I had never realized until then that what you ate affected your health, affected how you felt, affected your longevity, it affected your immune system. I mean, that seems obvious now, but back then it was such a complete revelation to me.
It completely makes sense. I mean, so it started you down the path to being an entrepreneur. So how did you compound on that? How did you double down on it?
Well, I went to work for this very small natural food store for a few months, and called the Good Food Company, and it got me excited because I thought, I could do this. This retail business doesn't seem that difficult. You order some stuff on the phone, it shows up at the back door, you stick it on your shelves, and you're nice to people. I thought that was well within my realm of competence at age 24.
You're a master of everything.
Yeah, so I just remember coming home one day from working there, and I went up to Renee and I said, Renee, what do you think about you and I opening up a store together? She thought that was the coolest idea. She was only 20. She thought that was the coolest idea she'd ever heard of. And so I often wondered how my life would have been different. She said, that is a stupid idea, John. There's no way I could do that. I mean, I probably wouldn't have done it. So she was excited, and then we just launched it, not knowing what we were doing. We had no business background, no real experience, except for my few months working in this other store. But we were both young and passionate, enthusiastic, and Renee and I lived in the store. We moved out of the community after it started out, and we lived it was an old house. We lived on the 3rd floor. We weren't supposed to be living there. It was against the code. But we didn't have a shower or bathroom, but we did have a Hobart dishwasher. So I'm pretty sure that violated most of the Austin's health code.
That's all right. What you don't know doesn't hurt you. So let me ask a serious question. You've described capitalism as the most important thing humanity has ever created. Why do you hold this belief, and has anyone ever come close to changing your mind about it?
If you know history, it's just obvious. Humanity if you go back a couple hundred years ago, 94% of everybody alive on planet Earth lived on less than $2 a day. 85% lived on less than $1 a day. The literacy rates were 88%. 88% of people in the world couldn't read. Average lifespan was 30. It was not great for most humanity. And capitalism is what lifted people. Capitalism plus science, the Enlightenment. But the ideas of science have to be, the entrepreneurs have to take those ideas and then spread them and operationalize them. And that's what capitalism did. For most of history, business people were under the thumb of the government and the priest, which the intellectual class, right? And then with capitalism, with the Industrial Revolution and Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, for a brief period of time, the hostility that's always been there against business people, that business people have been disliked throughout most of history. And it was lifted, and the genie got out of the bottle, and the Industrial Revolution exploded, and innovation began to occur, and the society began to shift, and then, I don't know, in the early, about 1830 or so, the intellectuals started having second thoughts about this because it was disrupting the class structure. You had these nouveau rich people that thought they were as good as the people that, had noble blood. But the genie was out of the bottle and they couldn't stuff it back in. But they've been trying to do it ever since. They're still trying to do it today, I might add. But it was capitalism that's lifted humanity out of poverty. It's capitalism that's created all this progress in the world.
Why do you think, especially the younger generation, has such a negative view of capitalism? Let me try this again. Why do you think, especially the younger generation, has such a negative view of capitalism?
Because of the intellectuals, primarily. They're the class enemy of business people. They always have been. They still are. And they're the ones that get the young mind and talk about all the evils of capitalism. However, there's another factor, which is, remember, children they're raised in families. And families, it's sort of communistic in a family. It's, the resources are distributed and the children are taken care of. And when young people come of age and they look around and they see poverty still, and they see things aren't equal, some have more than others, a sensitive mind is horrified by that. It's like, well, that doesn't seem fair to me. Because it wasn't like that in their families, right? Hopefully. And they feel like they want to try to correct that. And then the intellectuals tell them, well, that's capitalism doing that. And then if you don't have the historical knowledge of what it was like before capitalism actually began, then you might buy that big lie. Mm-hmm. And so they're utopians. You've heard that saying, if you're not a socialist when you're 21, then you don't have any heart. But if you're still a socialist when you're 30, you don't have any brains.
There's a common misconception out there that people believe free markets or capitalism in general are defined as winners and losers. Can you explain more of, because you've fought against this before, you've come out on this, you've talked about this many times. Can you explain more what you mean by this, that this is actually completely misguided, and why?
It is completely misguided, and the reason why people think that way is because that's the way games are normally played. There's a winner, and there's mostly a lot of losers. In the NFL, there's a Super Bowl champion, and everybody else lost. Or there's a World Series winner, or there's an NBA champion, or whatever the sport is. That's the way games are played. You play cards, somebody wins, somebody else loses. This is a zero-sum game. Capitalism is not a zero-sum game. Business is not a zero-sum game. Business is one where you're creating value for all of these interdependent constituencies or stakeholders. You're creating value for your customers, you're creating value for your employees, you're creating value for suppliers, you're creating value for your investors, and therefore you're creating values for the community that you're part of. It's business, and capitalism is not a game where there's one winner and a ton of losers. The whole society is lifted up. It's a different kind of game, if it's a game at all. Right. But if you want to use the game metaphor, it's one where there are multiple winners. It is competitive so that some competitors will lose. But the great thing about capitalism is that competition forces people to get better at what they're doing. Higher quality, better service, innovations, because you're trying to stay ahead of your competitors. You're trying to keep your group prospering, and that competition creates the upward progress. So that's business is misunderstood because people think, hey, if Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates are so rich, they must have taken that money from other people. They stole it or something, right? How else did they get so rich? Well, they got rich because they created so much value for other people who exchanged, voluntary exchange. It's not a fixed pie where Jeff and Bill took a big piece of the pie. That's not what it is. They've grown the pie. It's so much bigger now. Think how much better our lives are because of Microsoft, Amazon, and all the businesses that serve our needs and create Apple. One of the best examples is the iPhone is less than 20 years old.
Right.
And everybody in our society is completely addicted to their smartphone. I don't get up and I get up like, I have my phone, I have my wallet. Okay, I can go. And
phone first before.
Yes, but what's different at universities today than when I was a student? When I was a student, I would be looking around at the women. And everybody now is looking on their phone.
Well, what's wrong with that?
It can take a whole direction there, but I'm going to keep on particular.
I probably am already in trouble.
Yeah, don't worry. I haven't gotten thrown off the board yet. It's funny when you think about, if I could riff just a little bit more on the free market component. When you look at segments, what segments do you see the least amount of innovation in, and why do you think that is?
It's obvious, the ones that have the most government regulation, which in America are healthcare, and education.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are that's where the United States underperforms the world for the most part. We spend more money on healthcare than any other country by far, and our health outcomes are mediocre. Yeah. Because we don't have a free market system. When was the last time you went to a doctor and they handed you a rate sheet for what they do? I oftentimes will go and I'll say, well, what's this going to cost? And they'll say, you have insurance, right? And I say, well, don't worry about it. We're going to build the insurance company. I often wish I could run Whole Foods that way. No prices. Get up to the register. Says, how much is this going to cost? Don't worry, we're going to grow your grocery insurance. Do you think groceries would become a little more expensive if you did it that way?
Yeah, just a tad. So let's take a little bit farther and talk about free markets. Talk about free markets' ability to help deal with some of the challenges society's gone in. So right now, we've seen recently there's a lot of political tension.
You think?
Just a tad. Within our society. Do you believe conscious capitalism can play a pivotal role in transforming that for the better?
But the progressives are trying to hijack conscious capitalism. They're trying to make it their creature, and by trying the whole ESG movement, conscious capitalism is just good business in a way. It's what good businesses have always done. They've always recognized that they have these stakeholders, they have constituencies, and they're somewhat interdependent. A good employer is always going to want to take care of their employees because they'll have lower turnover. They'll get more skilled. They will put their best energy into the company, and that'll serve the customers. You also know that if you're a retailer, particularly, you know this. You know better than your supply chain. So you want to have partnerships with your suppliers. You also know that you have to create value for your investors, or they're not going to want to invest in your business. So it's just sort of common sense to realize that you're creating value for all of these interdependent stakeholders, and so that's kind of common sense. But what's happened, or what's trying to happen there, is that they're trying to make corporations focus on issues where they have no business focusing on, where they have no particular competency or knowledge. I'm talking about social issues, racial relations, or gender, or climate change, and things like that. It's like, and that's just outside of the scope. Whole Foods cannot solve racism. We can be an employer who treats people as individuals, regardless of their race, or their gender, or their sexual preferences, but we can't solve the social problem, that if there is one out there.
Good for you.
Corporations are being asked to basically do that, or choose sides, or at least make political statements for that. So that's why I say it's trying to be hijacked, and that would be conscious capitalism. We think it's more about focusing on environmental and social issues.
See, when I think of conscious capitalism, when I've read your book, I think a lot about stakeholder integration. And maybe you could just explain that a little bit, because I think it's the heart. It really speaks to how to look at people and how to treat people fairly. But it also talks about your love and passion around culture. And maybe you could expand a little bit on that too.
Sometimes when I explain conscious capitalism to people, I talk about purpose, I talk about stakeholders, I talk about leadership and culture, the 4 pillars. And after I do it, the guys, somebody who's a good business person says, well, that's just good business. Exactly. That's what people have been doing, that good businesses have been doing. Conscious capitalism is simply making those good practices more conscious.
Absolutely.
If you're more conscious of it, you can do it. Once you realize that stakeholders are interdependent, they form a system, then you can begin to manage the system to a higher degree of optimization, realizing that happy team members results in happy customers, which results in happy investors. And so that's really what it is. It's capitalism. I'll tell you a story. The very first time the very first conscious capitalism group I ever got together, it was over a weekend, it was a retreat. There were like 15 of us. And Rod Sisodia, my co-author of the book, he and I co-founded it. He was there with me. And afterwards, I said, well, I don't know if I want to do that again. I said, one night, says, all we got were a bunch of socialists. And I had to, at the end of the meeting, I had to say, you guys, you don't understand. This is conscious capitalism. It believes in free markets, voluntary exchange, free trade. It's not socialism. You just think the conscious means that somehow or another becomes socialism. It is not. It's capitalism just done more consciously. So, from that point onward, I tried to keep the socialists out of the group. And we ended up having a movement that's grown now pretty successful. It's international and making great progress.
No, it's had a great impact on me. The thought process of really how to put your employees in first and how to take care of them and love them. And you use those words. You use the words love, which is not associated with capitalism.
You know, it should be. Think about this for a moment. Is there anything in life more important than love? When you get on your deathbed, are you going to be thinking, man, I wish I'd made more money. I wish I'd worked harder. You're probably going to be thinking about the people you love. You're going to be thinking about the relationships, what you wish you said and didn't say, but maybe still have time to say, or something you said that somebody's passed away and it's a regret. I mean, that's what we're going to be thinking about, because at the end of the day, that's what really matters in life. So love is what matters. And yet, because of the way we think about business, the metaphors that we use to think about business, which are primarily war metaphors, sports metaphors, Darwinian survival of the fittest metaphors, they're all about hyper-competition. And while competition is part of business, it's not the essence of business. The essence of business is creating value for customers. That's why business exists.
You got that right.
But if you're at war, you know, check love's in the corporate closet because of the metaphors we use to structure business, which are hyper-competitive. But love, if you can, when you unleash it in your organization, it's what holds people together. The two things people most want in life, in my opinion, and they want it from their work as well. They want purpose. They want to feel like what they're doing is making a difference. And it's not, that it's just not meaningless. And secondly, they want to feel that they're cared about. People want to feel that somebody cares about them. And if you do both of those things at work, if you unleash love and care and combine it with purpose, you'll have a very, very jazzed up workforce.
Right.
And they're not going to turn over very easily. They'll get offers for more pay, but they won't leave because this is their family, this is their community, this is where people understand them and love them. So, yeah, I want love to be unleashed out of the corporate closet. Whole Foods is a company, I'm just going to say it, it's a company based on love. That's what we do. That's why we've been named one of the 100 best companies to work for 20 consecutive years, because we care about our people. It's just as simple as that. And there are many business people here that care about the people that work for them. We're just a bigger one. That's all.
It's just a little bit bigger. I want to take a little bit of a different twist here. You had a debate with Milton Friedman.
Are you going off script? Are you still on?
Let me know when you're off script. I'm trying my best. I've got a couple questions here that I'm pretty sure I'll be shot for. But you had a debate with Milton Friedman in 2005, where you challenged his views on shareholders, on the view that companies are set up solely for the existence of shareholders. How do you view the reasons for companies existing, one, and two, what are your views on companies having too narrow a focus on only one reason, like shareholder value?
First of all, Milton Friedman is one of my heroes, and he had a big influence on me. Still does, really. And I got to know him before he passed. And some other time, I can tell you a story about when I took Milton and Rose out to dinner in San Francisco and converted Milton Friedman to a vegan. But that's another story. In this instance, I just feel like the enemies of capitalism have used the argument that it's just about the shareholders. It's made capitalism vulnerable to its enemies. It's a bad way to market it, essentially. And it turns out, when Milton and I really talk about it, we actually agree, because he agrees that you have to create value for customers, and he agrees that you have to create value for employees, because how they're going to help be the ones that create value for the customers, and that these are not in conflict, and indeed they're not. I'm merely saying that when you focus strictly on the shareholders, there can be some negative unintended consequences of that. Because I really do think the purpose of business is to create value for customers. And if you do that well, that will create value for shareholders. It's where you're putting the cart before the horse. If you exist primarily just to make money, I already feel like you're going to sub-optimize your business. First of all, imagine somebody comes to work for Whole Foods, and the day they show up, we take them through an orientation. Hey, so glad you're going to work for Whole Foods. Your job while you're here is to maximize profits for our shareholders. What do you think that's going to? What do you think will be more powerful in actually maximizing profits for shareholders? To say that, or to say we are all about our higher purpose is to nourish people on the planet, and your job is to help satisfy and delight our customers.
Take care of your customers.
That's your job, and the management's job is to hire the best people, make sure they're well trained, and then make them as happy as possible so they'll serve the customers better. It's just, I have a more complex view of it. And I know why Milton focused on the shareholders. He was worried about the socialists co-opting it somehow or another, getting it like it's trying to do today, getting it working on things that are not creating value for customers, not creating value for employees, not creating value for shareholders, but fulfilling some kind of other political agenda. That's what he was worried about. And I'm worried about it too. And that's why I say conscious capitalism is trying to get hijacked for that agenda when it was never intended to be that. So we have to create value for shareholders, but it's not simply that. You think about it as we have multiple purposes in a way. We have to create value for all of these, including the shareholders. And it's not about a bunch of trade-offs. That's the problem. People think it's a trade-off between one stakeholder and another. That's not the right way to think about it. These are interdependent, and they're in a system-type relationship, and you're trying to optimize all of them at a higher level, including the shareholders. I remember in that argument, not with Milton, but T.J. Rogers was also, that's in a Reason magazine article. And I mean, Whole Foods is an amazingly successful story. It's made a ton of money. It's created tremendous value for our shareholders. I mean, we started with one store and $45,000. We sold it to Amazon for $13.7 billion. So that the philosophy works.
to take.
I think I could have gotten more, but.
Quite well. By all means, I was going to ask you about current capitalism. They take you off on the loop.
They said it was take it or leave it at that final price. The board took it, but I don't know. I think they wanted us pretty bad.
You're going to make it to the evening, so don't worry about it on that front. So maybe take a little side digression on this, because when people always give examples of why capitalism is bad or why capitalism doesn't work, they invariably give some type of example that ultimately feels, if you break it down, it's some individual who's taking advantage of a situation, like they're using lobbyists to create a regulation to protect their business. What I effectively just call crony capitalism.
Right.
And I mean,
or crapitalism, I don't know.
That's good. Can you give me your thoughts on that? I mean, how do we fight that? How do we expose that? And how do we help people understand that that's not capitalism? At its finest, at least.
What part of our society doesn't have that? Where are all the angels? Are they in government? Are they our lawyers? Everyone. Business is held to an impossible standard of perfection. And there are bad actors in business. There are people that lie, cheat, and steal. Just like there are in every other aspect of existence. There are bad teachers. There are bad architects. There are people that pad their bills and do dishonest things. It's not just business people. What's beautiful about business is that because it's based on voluntary exchange, if you get a reputation for cheating people, then your business begins to suffer as a result. I'll give you an example. Whole Foods Market, and we have like 530 stores, and we have lots of different landlords. And some of those landlords are bad landlords that try to take advantage of us. Guess what? We don't do business again with those landlords. And we tell people about our bad experiences with them, so other people will be warned. But when we find a good landlord, we might do 20, 30, sometimes 40 different locations with them. Because we found we can trust them, we found they have integrity, we found that when we have a problem, we can work it out. But to criticize business because some people lie, cheat, and steal, that's unfair. That's holding business to an unfair standard that they're not holding the rest of society for. I think all those professors in universities don't lie sometimes.
We won't go down on the education front, because they have all views there that are very different, not very aligned with these. Okay, I'm going to ask one. This is the one riff, because we're going to get the hammer here in a little bit. But it's a policy specific, so you're obviously very focused on health. You're very focused on, how do we make people healthier so that they can, live fuller lives. And so there's a lot of, when we think about all the policies going on right now, especially around healthcare, there's an issue of a lot of policies specifically telling people, go get vaccinated. All the government focus is focusing on that. Whether you're right or against it, I'm not actually trying to argue that point. What I want to ask about is, why aren't we talking about human beings actually getting better shape, build up their immunity system, and actually start to do things that they can fight back? I'd love to get your thoughts on what we can do to start forcing those type of thoughts into this discussion.
That's what I'm going to do when I retire from Whole Foods. That's my vision. I think the whole healthcare system needs to be completely disrupted in terms of. When do you go see a doctor?
Right.
When you're sick. What if you reverse that and you enter into a relationship? If you go to the Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic, you can do this for like $10,000. You can get this whole analysis of your health. Imagine for a second how you have your biometrics, and with things like Apple Watches and whatnot, we are able to monitor ourselves in a way we never could. One thing I've learned, for example, from my Apple Watch, anytime I drink, my sleep quality goes down, which is very unfortunate because I actually enjoy alcohol. I don't sleep as well, and so I see that, and my alcohol consumption dropped like 90%. Because I just sleep better. So I'm becoming more conscious. But just imagine for a moment that you know your biometrics and you're working with a doctor and maybe a team of doctors or team of health people to coach you. So we can make Adam a plan with you to get you up to a higher level of health and well-being, strengthening your immunity system. And a doctor can oversee that. So basically, we're trying to get we're all in a health continuum. Imagine that we all were getting the feedback we needed, like I'm getting with the sleep, to become more conscious of it, so how we can be healthy. We know how important diet is, we know how important, although there's a lot of conflicting advice about diet. Exercise, sleep, stress management, toxins we take in, and emotional health, and positive attitude, not going into depression. Imagine you have a team of people working with you to help get you to a higher level. That's how our healthcare system should be. That's what we should be doing. That's what I hope to do in my act too.
In your act too, I love it. It's very appropriate way to ask about that too, because my last question was going to be around, okay, you're stepping down. So maybe you've already given the entire story, but...
No, I got lots of other things.
You know, in fact, one friend of mine asked the question this way. He said, how can I phrase it? He said, just ask him, look, you have it all. What are you going to do next?
I believe the good life is one where you die with lots of unfinished projects. Because projects give our life meaning. You know, Buckminster Fuller once said something that has inspired me for decades. He said, Buckminster Fuller almost committed suicide when he was 30 years old. He was in deep depression. He was thinking of going to jump off this bridge because his daughter had died of meningitis and his wife divorced him. He was on welfare. And before he killed himself, he had this sort of flash of spiritual insight. He asked himself a question: what if instead of killing myself, I decided to find out how much good one person can do in a lifetime? And he devoted himself to that.
That's so cool.
That's a pretty good thing to devote your life to. How much good can one person do?
Well, I hope very, very much that you go and take that same attitude into healthcare to help us push the regulation away and help us all actually think about how we can be healthier and take control of our lives. With that being said, we have a plaque. I think I'm doing this correctly. We have a plaque we'd like to give you. It's our Columbia Award. It's a thanks for all the hard work you're doing to promote the good word of free market and capitalism. I'll read what's scripted on it. 2021 Columbia Award, given to John Mackey, for your strong commitment to freedom and capitalism, and for spreading free market principles of prosperity nationally and globally, while providing leadership in the corporate world. We thank you very much.
Hey, very much.
Capitalism does the most good in the world.
Yes, sir.
The answer to that question is capitalism. Free markets, free minds, free will.
Thank you so